Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today I'm excited to re-release the episode that I recorded on our very first podcast with my friend, Ian Mitchell. Ian is an amazing scientist, and our conversation today covers the body's ability to heal from the standpoint of science. This isn't a woo-woo conversation. This is all about the science. I enjoyed this episode so much, and I'm excited to release it again for you now.
Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Julie. I'm excited and incredibly jazzed to be here.
So some of our listeners might be a little confused by why I wanted to kick off my podcast with such a science guy. So I want to jump in a little bit about, why is it that you think that I would want, as I've called you, a mad scientist? Your nickname is the Wizard, somebody who uses his brain and has a very science-based approach to be talking to all of us about autoimmunity and healing.
Sure. Yeah, I think actually what I do overlaps incredibly well with it, because the crux of a lot of the things that I've approached really deal with inflammatory response and autoimmunity. That's kind of dealing with inflammatory response systemically is really kind of the core of a lot of the components that trigger your body's, fight with autoimmunity.
I love it. And I know you don't only work in autoimmunity, you touch on pretty much anything big that I can think of that humanity is dealing with at the moment, whether it be...
I've decided to stop just autoimmunity today. That's it.
Okay. Well, we are going to focus there, but I want everybody to know that, you bring a very varied background to the conversation.
That is very true. Yeah, I do everything from biochemistry to chemistry to physics to quantum physics to all sorts of weird, bizarre projects I work for all kinds of groups, quantumly entangled satellites for remote telemetry for NASA, gamma shielding, carbon negative concrete to decrease the global CO2 burden.
Yeah, you're right. Let's talk about autoimmunity. That's a lot there.
That's the thing is, yeah, I do. But, when I try and deal with all the commonality of all the things I'm doing are to make life better for people. Right. And that's it at a core. I mean, you know me, and that's really, it sounds kind of like lip service, like, oh, I love taking long walks on the beach at night, but it's actually true. I mean,
I can tell the audience it's 100% true. Yes.
Yeah, I really am just trying to help. And to that end, most of the conditions that I've seen with people that really create kind of physical and devastation, you can eliminate so much of it if you just hit a couple of core components. And your body's trying to do everything it can to get back into some sort of homeostasis. And when it's out of kilter, I feel like my job is to just provide it with the tools it needs so that it can do what it wants to do. I mean, it's a brilliantly intelligent system. Anybody who actually studies physiology and biochemistry, if you do not find yourself in a state of pure awe when looking at the body, you're doing it wrong,
So you, my friend, this grand scientist, are you saying that you agree that the body can heal?
100%. It's designed to heal. It has really, when you look at what the body is, to my estimation, it's an information system. And I know we were both just at the biohacking conference in Orlando, and one of the demonstrations that I did was for a quantum biology company that I work with, and I'm on their board of advisors for science. And they asked me to come out and do a demonstration to show this quantum stuff, because everybody thinks of quantum as kind of woo-woo. And the problem there is there's not really a definitive nomenclature whereby people can communicate, because one guy says quantum and he means, small packets of discrete energy. One guy says quantum and he means wave things. And another says it, he means, like the woo-woo stuff between people. It's, there just isn't really a good defined parlance for everybody to talk about it. But in this case, what I did was to take someone who was horribly allergic to shellfish, do a dermal roll, put some crab in it. And, they had, as you would expect with, just basically an allergist test, big histamine reaction immediately. And then I took the standard little quantum block, which is just literally plates of metal, and put the same crab juice in for a couple of minutes while I was lecturing. And then I took it out and did a dermal roll on his other arm and put the same package of crab juice on with no reaction. And the reason it didn't react is because we think of, molecules as these very tiny, round little things, but in actuality, they're an interference pattern. That's all information. And the edges of those waves are jagged. It's more like Legos than smooth marbles, so that they have surfaces. And what you're actually reacting to with the histamine reaction is not so much the chemical compound, but it's the energetic components around it in terms of the waveform interactions. Some are additive resonant harmonics, some are destructive, So what I did was just simply smooth out the surface of the interference pattern so that biologically it didn't have anything that was sticky, kind of like rubbing the carpet in the right direction. And autoimmunity plays in such a way that when the body's dysregulated, it has all of the intrinsic information to heal itself. It's just generally something has created an impediment to it, whether it's a decrease in, energy, which is why I focus a ton on mitochondrial health, or if it's just a systemic toxicity, which is, and those two things, they're kind of like the bad bandit brothers of inflammatory response,
Sure. There's never just one by itself, because if you're toxic, your mitochondria is struggling.
Yeah. It's right. And, most of the things that you've seen me play with, it's never one system, because I have yet to find like, ooh, look, the magic bullet. It's rare. So usually we're a complex system. So in order to address what we're doing, you have to provide the body with a whole host of tools that it needs. So, and it's not, you can't give what it needs as step one as step three, or you won't have an impact, right? You can't give something that's not bioavailable, like, oh, I had 15 pounds of grape jelly slathered on my body, I'm no longer hungry. If it's not in the right space, it doesn't really matter how much you have. You're not going to derive the benefit.
Don't eat grape jelly. It's inflammatory. Don't do it.
It's glycemic training is what it is. So,
yeah. So if I hear you correctly, I want to dumb it down a little bit for our listeners and myself. We've had enough conversations about this. I know what you're saying, but what I'm hearing is we get blocks. We're designed to heal. The body can heal. It is incredible. But so we need to not only address the blocks, whatever it is that's causing, you mentioned toxins as a possibility, or energy. But then what I hear also is then we need to give it to what it needs to. We need to make sure it has what it needs to repair, and that we're not stopping that process.
Well, okay. So a couple of things that I can speak to perfectly along those lines. So one product that I developed was to regenerate hair. And a lot of people actually post-COVID are having issues with things because there's a drop in endocrine function after COVID. And it's pretty consistent. I'm on a lot of the long hauler boards because I had COVID twice. So I've been on the long hauler boards. And a lot of the women report hair loss and things like that. And that's because it appears to affect mitochondria, and the highest point of mitochondrial density in women is in their ovum. And because of that, you end up with this cascading endocrine dysregulation. And so they start to lose hair. So my thought was localize a decrease in inflammatory response and upregulate the energy. And it worked like a champ, right? So I just used a couple of molecules and peptides, some nanoparticles, some peptides, configured them properly with a penetrant to get them inside the cells, drops the local inflammation, upregulates the energy, triggers a bunch of fibronectin and collagen production kind of systemically, And then follicular cells, they do what they want to do. They get back to work, right? They've got the energy. They don't have the inflammation. The highways are clear. They're going back to work. And that's the same thing that I've seen with rheumatoid arthritis. If you drop out local inflammatory response, and I know you've looked at the stuff that I make for rheumatoid arthritis, the idea there was slightly different in that when people have some sort of rheumatic condition, very often there's sclerotic tissue that amasses, right? So they get scar tissue in a joint, and it's kind of this negative feedback loop where you move the joint and it hurts, so it gets more inflamed. So you move it, so it scars and it gets more inflamed. And eventually you build up this aggregate mass of all this sclerotic tissue. And so in order to roll that back, the idea there is you drop the inflammation and you provide enzymes to the area so that the enzymes can actually go in and break it down into little components that your body can use, pop into your lymph system, and you can excrete. So every time you take this stuff, it drops the inflammatory response and starts dissolving. Really, it's more dismantling, but the little components of human sclerotic tissue, and they get taken out of your system. So every time you do stuff, you have a little bit more room to move because there's a little bit less media, which in turn means there's a little bit less inflammation. And so you take something that's a negative feedback loop and you turn it into a positive feedback loop, and your body has what it needs and it just starts to heal itself. And then pretty much after that, we get out of the way and it does its thing.
So what you're saying is we can not only stop the decline in its tracks, but we can actually reverse symptoms and reverse damage.
Yeah, 100%. And, really, again, all we have to do are provide the body with the tools it needs to do what it wants to do naturally. Because if you saw that, part of this is you don't see these conditions typically in kids who are, say, 12-year-olds, because they have so much intracellular energy production that, when they have an impediment, their body just motors right through it and keeps going. It's, it's the older people in the mix. And I think, from a biological perspective, when you hit kind of your mid 30s, you start to slow down as a guy, you definitively start to slow down in your mid 30s. A lot of endocrine production starts to slow down. By the time you hit your 50s, things are really slowing down. You notice the creaky joints and this and that. And if you can just bump the energy up, then your body has enough to repair itself. And if you do, kind of the brilliant stroke of not only just bumping the energy up, but actually taking some of the debris out, you're doing a great job. And yeah, it's a very elegant system to end up at a place where you aren't just patching it over and, band-aiding things together. You're actually healing. The body is, in my opinion, and also my experience, and I've seen this a bajillion times in labs and in, clinical work, people heal. That's what we do. We're designed to do it.
Well, this is why I do what I do. I was told, absolutely, you're going to decline. We're so sorry. That's what they said. We're so sorry when I was diagnosed. You're so young. We'll keep you as comfortable as we can. Now, I've only known you since I was at least very relatively well. I didn't know you when they were trying to get me to put a handicap placard on my car or when I was on 10 prescriptions. But we were talking about quantum physics. Funny, when I believed that I would decline, shocker, what did I do for 11 years? I declined. But this concept of, your products are amazing. I'm excited to introduce anyone in my audience who doesn't already know them. And I'm really excited for the RA serum rollout is going to be amazing for people.
Agreed.
And it is this concept. It's not a magic bullet. So I'm not saying, I got off my prescriptions and here, take this magic serum. It is a healing avenue, but you've got to make the changes to stop pulling that trigger. Whatever was driving your inflammation still does need to be addressed to a point. Now, I know some of those triggers boosting that mitochondria. And your serums really are magic. We don't call you the wizard for no reason. But I will say to anybody, if you're having an ice cream cake every weekend and you take the serum, it may or may not work as well as it could. So I'm not saying it's an end all be all, but it is amazing. Like you said, when you give the body what it needs. And so many of us are lacking one of the reasons I love your serums, I grew up on a low fat diet. I can't imagine why I was sick. I mean, it's that simple.
Lack of building blocks, that's never hurt anyone, right?
Exactly. But so many of us are missing, and so many of our listeners are missing those building blocks and don't realize it.
Well, and unfortunately, a lot of the things that are prescribed actually work to our detriment. My dad, he's a really brilliant guy. And I noticed a dip, as did he, just in terms of cognitive performance when he started doing statins.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
You take something that's going to break down your lipids, which you kind of need that to, continue to have your brain functioning. Well, what do you expect? It's like taking all the gas out of a car. You really can't expect it to go very far. So, yeah, I'd like to provide solutions, especially for the people that are coming to do what you help with because of your own experience. Those guys need something that can give them a boost. They need something that can help them, but they also need something that's not going to have, 15 detrimental things.
Right.
Yeah, sure, we can move your toads, but we're going to leave you pythons instead. Not the best approach.
Well, which for at least the people that have entered the world of rheumatology, as I have. I mean, those treatment paths can be really detrimental, really, and I always used to wonder, is my brain fog because I'm so inflamed, or is it come from these drugs I'm pumping in my body? I wonder which, or both.
I've wondered, and I tried to call Glenn Fry to ask. Unfortunately, for some reason, he couldn't return my calls. Yeah. There's some detriment to it. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really hope is that I'd like to be able to benefit people in a way that they get better, they heal, their body does what it needs to. And then most importantly, they don't have to continue doing it. And that's actually, I think that's one probably from the pharmacological standpoint, things that I really, or more pharmaceutical really, that I probably annoy a lot of pharmaceutical people is everything I do is designed so people can use it and then stop using it. It's not such a great business model. But
I'm with you. My business, if I'm at all a decent coach, people don't need me to coach them for the rest of their lives. Yeah. Right? It's about giving the tools and letting them run. I mean, that's the beauty, or you're helping and not fixing. And you're a fixer. I know that already.
I do. I want to, it's the corner of the board. I have the 6 things that I started out with when I opened the lab that I really want to solve before I, keel over at some point. And it's important to me. It actually means something. But a big component of that is, truly wanting to leave this place better than I found it. And a lot of that is if people are in great shape, they do good things. When people are in spaces where they lack resources and where they lack health, they don't make good decisions and they're not kind to other people. I mean, if you fill an entire country with bad food, inflammatory oils, EMF waves that are, dysregulating calcium ion channels in the brain, and then you hit them with stuff that makes them go parasympathetic to sympathetic all the time. So they're kind of approaching life like a merecat.
It sounds like 2021 in the United States. Is what you just described, sadly.
Well, social isolation, smattering of social isolation. Yeah, that's the thing. So if we can address all those things, then life will be better for everybody. People will be happier and they'll make better decisions. So, I mean, what you and I do, it's small steps, but collectively, that's the journey, right? It begins with the first step, journey of 1,000 miles.
It is amazing. Would you be willing to share? I know you said some of them already, but would you share those 6 things with our audience? So for those that are unfamiliar with you, I want them to understand when I think of you and I think of big contribution or big brains, willing to take on big problems and know they're solvable. So I just want them to know who it is that's.
So the 6 things when I opened the lab were, the first on the board was aging. And the reason for that, there's so many symptoms of aging that are really just
inflammation,
mitochondrial dysregulation, toxic buildup, lack of intracellular efflux, things not moving out the way they need to. All that stuff, it's a cascading system. So that was the first thing on the board to knock out. And I won't say that I knocked it out because the data on that's going to take a while to collect if I did it properly. But I will say, my lab animals live 93% longer than they were supposed to, which is why
93%. I want to make sure everybody heard that.
Yeah, percent longer, which I think still is a record for any mammalian lifespan extension thing. So that was a good one, and it caught the note of some influential people. And then the next one was cancer, and that was kind of tied in because in terms of my lab animals, what I used were P53 knockout mice, which are tumor mice. And the P53 gene is your tumor suppressor gene. So that was missing. And generally when that's missing, they get all these unfortunate tumors all over their body, and they didn't get them, and it was peculiar. I mean, it was a bit of a shocker to me when I did the first necropsy. I looked inside and thought, am I just missing it? That particular mouse had died of a femoral hemorrhage. And I looked at it and I thought, surely there's got to be some tumor in here somewhere. And I found one little bitty kind of nibbit of a growth, but I didn't take it any further. So the next ones I sent out to a vet pathologist just because, they do that every day. They're far better than I am. And, they know all the nice mice bits. So they get the
they know where to look.
Yeah. They get all the proper mousy parts. But the same thing occurred, no incidence of death from tumors or really even any tumors. There were a couple of things that might have been, but usually with the P53 knockout mouse, there is no question. You have these huge bulbous growths, and to go from that where you're looking at, histology, trying to go, is there anything here? Can we find anything that might actually, show that there was some sort of tumor burden? And when you can't get anything conclusive in an entire cohort of mice, that's a really weird data set. I mean, it's very anomalous. It just doesn't happen. And so that was item number 2. And then based on that, I had been working on some other things, and it all kind of came together in a way that knocked out, I was able to knock out the metastatic spread of cancer just 100%. And so, at some point, hopefully that becomes common knowledge and more people start using that sort of stuff. The next one,
I'm a big fan of that. Well.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that getting out there too. So the next one on the list was global warming. And I developed a carbon neutral concrete, and then that was very simple for me. So then I upped it and made a carbon negative concrete, and it takes out 24% beyond the 8% that it would be normally accounting for production of. So it gives you a net 32 negative in terms of global concrete production for carbon emissions. So it would
I'm going to pause you on this one because those of us that have been diagnosed with autoimmunity typically are told, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? So we hear all the time, there's nothing we've ruined our environment. There's nothing we can do about it. Also not true.
Not true. The thing is, we can definitively take that back. I mean, if everybody ubiquitously adopted just what I just patented, it'd draw about 13 gigatons a year, which is a third of all of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Frankly, the CO2 it's the one that gets all the press, but there are things in our environment that actually I find far more pressing that aren't really listed. But I like the idea of dealing with the CO2, because when people become conscious and very aware of, oh, there is a problem, when they start addressing one, they're going to address more than one. And that's really kind of my hope, is that in giving people some tools to knock out the ones that they're really focused on, they start looking at the other things to knock out the others. Beyond that, the next one is clean water. And that's a problem, because our water, it's loaded with toxins and, pharmaceuticals and microplastics and xenoestrogens and all sorts of stuff that are endocrine dysregulators and disruptors. And, it's not the kind of thing you go, golly, I'll take a glass of this. There's some big problems. So I'm working on technologies to do that. Beyond that, energy systems, because I view it's kind of the global equivalent of not having enough money, right? People don't make good decisions when they don't have money. People don't make good decisions if they don't have energy, because if you have a really good, clean supply of energy, you can have desalination, and you can end up with water that you can drink, and your life is better. And, so that energy systems was kind of a biggie. And I've got some things in the works on that are, they're different than most of the things now, but they're not really different than stuff that's been around for the past 100 years, just not for whatever reason, as my dad always says, truth is like the short man in a room. A lot of people just look directly over it. And in this case, there are a lot of things that, were done in the turn of the last century. Tesla, Walter Russell, there's some really bright guys out there that all came at different approaches and found things that made a big dent. And so I've just kind of done the 21st century update.
The fine tuning, so we can add Ian Mitchell to that list of
Yeah. And then the last one was superluminal travel, which is just the faster than light travel. And I don't actually have that one pegged. I've got relativistic travel pegged, which is, getting you up to light speed. But that sounds like kind of a bold claim. But I'm aware of that. But, if the other stuff I'm doing, like I'm working on gamma shielding for NASA, and then, quantumly entangled satellites and a bunch of other weird things. But this is actually not really that strange. The ideas have been out there for a while. There were just a couple of components that weren't quite addressed properly. And so to be clear, I haven't cracked that egg, because I don't have anything that'll go faster than, but I do now have things that approximate. And that's the thing is, I do believe it's possible. I think I'd be hosed if I didn't think they were possible. I honestly, my conception of how things work is, if you have a question, then inherent in the potential of the question is the answer. So somewhere out there, and it may not be now, it may be 500 years from now, and maybe 1,000 years from now. And anybody who's ever heard me talk about this knows that when I was a kid, my dad used to have me do this exercise where he'd ask me a problem and say, okay, here's the problem. Can you solve it? And if I could, I'd just solve it. And if I couldn't, he'd go, is there a solution for it 500 years from now? I go, no. And you go, okay, 1,000 years from now. I go, yeah, it'll definitely be solved in 1,000 years. And then you go, okay, just project yourself into the future, look at what you think they've done in your imagination, and just bring it back and do it. And at the time, it seemed this kind of like sort of little esoteric thing that I didn't really understand. But over the years, I realized that, there's some gems in there, because it expands what you think is possible. And if you actually firmly believe that it's possible, you might not make it, but you stand a much better shot of doing it than if you think there's absolutely no way in the world you can get it done. And so I literally try and approach every problem like that.
So we should all thank your father, basically, for the
in truth
he's making to all of us.
He's actually, he's had some pretty profound gems that he's thrown in my direction that were really formative, and actually, I mean, aside from the fact that he's a really brilliant guy, he was very grounded. And he grew up as a really poor kid, and he ended up becoming a professor. But he dropped out of school because my grandfather got tuberculosis, faked his age, joined the Merchant Marine, shipped out, went all over the world, and ended up stuck in India as a teenager. Kind of a very colorful background, but really just a gem of a human. And he always told me, kind of when I'm doing what I'm doing, the one I think that stood out the most was I was doing monetarily incredibly well at the time. And he said, I just want to make sure that when you get wherever it is you are going, you're the same person who got on the train, because sometimes you're in first class, sometimes you're in coach, and sometimes you're shoveling coal. Don't let it fundamentally alter who you are as a person. And it was profound. It really did impact me, because that's pivotal, because sometimes you do incredibly well. And I think that's why the core of all this for me is, how can I help? Right. Because at times we all need help. Like I need help all the time. And so when I'm able to give it, I try and do that, because there's a sort of reciprocity in the world. And that's kind of the important stuff. So anyway, that's it.
Well, and give it you do. And I think one of the things that's so amazing and unique about you is that you have this broad focus, right? It's the whole world. It's all the problems. It's not just, I mean, there are people who spend their lives, working on cancer or working on, maybe not even trying to treat RA, sadly, a drug and so we've had conversations before about this view of, when there obviously what's going on in the universe is affecting all of us at all times, but we're not always aware of that. Sometimes we get stuck in what's going on with us right now. To kind of circle back to your idea of, when you don't physically have the energy, it is difficult to be a good human and a contributing human.
Yes, it is.
It is. And I've seen that even with my own healing journey. The better I feel, the more I wanted to, that's why I started the podcast. I don't want anybody stuck at home thinking that RA is a death sentence and just how slow or fast is it going to be? That's that doesn't need to be the story. So I thank you for helping me change the story from a perspective of true science base. As somebody who, you've helped me so greatly, not just as a friend, but as a scientist. I've seen what your products can do, your anti-metastatic serum is important in our family. We know firsthand it works. And I haven't gotten into this on the podcast yet, but I had a really good head injury a year and a half ago. And sure enough, Ian to the rescue with his brain products. And it was life-changing, life-saving, really. So I'm excited to bring the RA serum to the world and those struggling as an extra tool, because I know if they make the changes in lifestyle and address those levers, they will heal. This is that boost, though, like nothing else, that really is amazing.
Yeah, leg up in a bottle.
Yes. So I was so excited to dive in with you that I skipped what was supposed to be my first question, which is, and I know you've done a lot of podcasts and a lot of people really, have heard you speak many times, but what is one thing about you that our audience either may not know or may be surprised to learn?
Ooh, boy, that's a good question. I'm pretty much an open book. Let's see.
Like a fun fact.
A fun fact. Well, you know this. I don't know how many other people would. When I moved to Austin, I was voted the best new jazz artist in Austin because I'm a saxophonist and have done that my entire life.
Heck of a dancer. People might not know that. I have
that is true. And actually, I did that when I was growing up. I joined all sorts of stage productions and theater productions just as a dancer because I like dancing, and that's true. And let's see. And I've got I did a lot of dance, a lot of martial arts, but all sort of more peaceful styles like Aikido and things like that. Because they made more sense to me until I ran into a problem with flexor tendonitis because I was doing too much saxophone at the same time I was doing too much Aikido. So I had to give one of them up. And then, people probably know that I meditate a ton just because I want to keep my brain all tapped in. Let's see. Go for it.
It might even be the same one. You said brain tapped in and it reminded me. You do not drink alcohol or use any brain altering substances.
No, that is true. In fact, at the conference we were just at, I have a friend who shall remain unnamed that brought a fair amount of illicit substances, and they gave me a fair amount of them because they were trying to try them out and they wanted to see what everyone's response would be. And I took them as a courtesy, but I told them beforehand, I said, it's not going to have an effect on me because the state that you're trying to approximate there is the state I'm actually already
in. Right.
And oddly enough, I think it kind of at least one of the guys on the team there, because I do contract work for their company and development and things like that on a biochemical side. I think one of the guys in their company was a little incredulous about the fact that a huge dose had no effect on me. But in truth, I mean, that's because at a certain point, your brain is functioning differently and it has more firing going on than a normal person would. Yeah. But that, I mean, literally 30 years of meditation and, deep work, you're going to have some effects, right? You go
and to clarify for the audience, when you refer to an illicit substance, you are not talking about A, anything technically illegal, B, anything that would down regulate your brain power. You're talking about brain boosting. I'm guessing we were at a biohacking conference. Yeah, we love to boost, right? So,
and actually, in truth, no, none of them were. They were illicit, but technically not illegal because they're not even so common.
They're not. They don't even exist yet.
They're research chemicals that you can only get in countries, and
right. But I wanted our audience to understand how protective you are of your brain and body, and how thoughtful you are about what you put in it, and which is really. It's a gift to the world because that brain is a resource.
It is. Everybody's brain is a resource, and everybody's physiology can be upregulated. Before we started today, I told you I was doing a B cell procedure on myself in my lab, and I was pulled 180 mils of blood and made PRP, and then activated it with lasers, and then re-injected it. And that's the kind of stuff that I wouldn't do it if I didn't see, and there's a fair amount of data that's starting to amass on the benefits of stuff like that. But it's, I'm constantly looking to level up. And when there are old broken components, I want to replace them. So, a lot of the things I do are senolytics to take out zombie cells so that, I don't have things that are creating cascading detrimental. Yeah. Well, exactly. Right. You get some zombie cells. They do this, but your audience may not. The function is called paracrine signaling, and it's a signal through a certain organ system or endocrine system in that local environment. And just say 5% of the cells dysregulated will cascade out and affect 25%, and that's a big drop, right? So you got to take out the trash. You have to eliminate that stuff, and so. I'm constantly, looking for things to optimize my brain function, optimize my biological function as a whole. I mean, my brain serum, the one you took, I take that stuff like it's going out of style. We actually literally were discussing yesterday putting it on tap in the lab. So,
I love it. and I have no doubt you shortly will.
We actually got a kegerator for that purpose. So
that is fantastic. Well, I really, really hope you will come back and talk to us again. I'm trying to keep the episodes within a drive. And I know we have a lot more to talk about that'll benefit the audience.
Anytime you come in, you'll have me. I'd be happy to be here.
Well, then it's going to be weekly. No, I'm kidding. Would love to have you back. Two last questions. One would be a simple, small step that anybody listening can take to up-level their health, no matter where they are in their health journey.
Don't eat one day a week. Just skip eating one day a week. That's it. Take the Gandhi approach. Just pick a Monday and don't consume. Doesn't require anything. Very, very easy. That's it.
Love that. Awesome. Fantastic. And where can listeners find you?
Wizardsciences.com is probably the easiest. On Instagram, at IanMitchell1. And generally a lot of people reach out to me, and I'm still a person, so I reach back.
Yes, you are.
And I'm pretty accessible, and if I can help anybody with anything, just ping me.
I love it. And we will have that you're hearing it here first. We'll have that RA serum coming at you shortly, and the links will be in the show notes to both Ian and his company and how to get your hands on that serum. Ian, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Julie.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.